We laughed at his sex life after his award speech. He got furious and just, "Hello, Reddit. My name is Beatrice and I'm 29 years old. For privacy reasons, I'll be using fake names. I'm tired of people throwing shades at me, and these past few days have been really rough and really terrible for me. I've had people that barely know anything about me get the chance to judge me as if they've known me all my life, and now have the right to say whatever they want. It's all my fault. I know that, and I don't exactly care about their judgments because they know nothing of the truth. I did do something horrible to my fiancé Eddie. My friends and I, we laughed at his sex life after his award speech, and Eddie had found out and he got really furious and he just ruined everything, most particularly my life and everything that I am. Eddie had gotten up from that table and he had just decided to share with everyone my secret, the one I didn't ever think he would ever find out, the one I didn't think he even knew. The secret I thought was perfectly safe between my friends and I and Dan. Eddie had exposed me right there in that hall filled with half people that I barely knew and half of the people I already knew. Eddie had found out about my affair with Dan, a guy I met 3 months back, and he decided to expose me right in front of that huge crowd. I met Eddie, my fiancé, 2 years back, and we've been together for that duration too. We started dating almost immediately after we met, and it was really lovely from the start. Eddie was the typical caring and romantic guy, totally different from all the other guys I've ever met before. He's thoughtful and didn't do things without informing me first, which I found cute at the time, and he bought me everything I needed, and I even moved in with him barely a month into our relationship, and Eddie had no complaints whatsoever about it. We even got engaged after a year of being together, but we didn't get married yet, because Eddie wanted us to get a bigger house, so we could move in immediately after our wedding, so he was saving for it. But despite how dependable and perfect Eddie was, there was one aspect of our relationship that suffered the most, and it was that particular aspect that made the whole thing strenuous and frustrating for me. Eddie wasn't good sexually. He was that boring type that just thought having sex was just the usual normal way, and then that was all. There was no foreplay or some exciting things like different sex styles, positions, all of those things that made sex very great, and there was no excitement with Eddie. He was usually always done within 5 to 10 minutes, which didn't do anything except make me sexually frustrated, and the fact that he went to bed right after and didn't even understand that I wasn't halfway satisfied, it annoyed me greatly. While I sit there beside him, still extremely turned on, he'd turn on his side and sleep off, admittedly being very tired from working himself to the bone for his company. But I stopped finding excuses for him after a while. At first I thought I could cope with it. I did try to cope with it. I made him watch movies that portrayed all the numerous ways which we could try to make our sex life exciting, and I wore sexy lingeries to seduce him and try to make him last longer. I even got one weird pill at one time for him, but Eddie had ended up in the hospital because of the pill. I heard from a friend whom I had complained to about Eddie's condition, and she had advised smoking pot, but that was out of the option because Eddie never smoked, so I couldn't try that out. I tried everything else, though, so I could just add spice to our sexual life, but each time had been a failed attempt. I was really frustrated every time we had sex, because I never had an orgasm with him, because of the short duration, and it was only when I started to enjoy the whole thing that he'd pull out and then lay in the bed exhausted, and then sleep off, leaving me to deal with the whole me situation. For a year I endured it. I endured it so much and had even declared myself a nun because of it. My 2 best friends who knew about my situation because I told them would always laugh at me and then recount their own stories about the good sex they had with their partners that day or the day before just to taunt me, and I really was taunted. I became too oppressed and sexually frustrated that the first time another guy had managed to hold my attention longer than was necessary, I jumped in. That was Dan. The first day I had seen Dan, I had been at the mall eyeing some nice earrings while I was shopping for some clothes with my friends. I didn't want to buy the earrings because I thought they were too expensive, and I had spent more than was necessary for the shopping already. Dan must have noticed me staring at the earrings, and he had actually gone to pay for it, and while my friends and I heated out of the mall, he approached me and handed over the earrings already packaged in a tiny cute box, and then left. I was surprised and happy when I saw the contents of the box, and Dan had slipped in his number inside that box too. So I called him that night and thanked him for the gift, and then we just got talking. I was certain that Dan knew more about me than most people had over the years in just that one conversation. We spoke past midnight and then proceeded to chat throughout the entire day the next day, and Dan was fun and flirty. He was adventurous too, nothing like Eddie, who was always calculating. Eddie didn't suddenly leave town for days because he wanted to have fun or when he felt like it. He didn't plan a surprise trip back home from any of his work businesses, and he would have called me to inform me he was coming. Eddie was just so predictable, plain and simple to be with. Nothing like the complex, unpredictable, and volatile Dan and I liked it. I liked taking risks, and seeing that was exactly what Dan portrayed. It was easy for him and I to get along well. Well enough to know each other's private parts more than our middle names. The first time wasn't even a mistake. It was something well planned. Dan had invited me over to his place that evening, and although I knew Eddie was not going to go back home early that night, I still called him and lied about having a girls' night. Eddie, of course, believed me because we did it often. The girls and I hung out at any of our places and just all night while snacking, and we have done it several times already, so it was just the perfect lie. I went to Dan's place, and knowing exactly what we were there for, we just literally started helping each other with our clothes. We were like animals in heat that evening, and it was so intense that I only remembered protection after we had finished. There had been no need for foreplays that day. We had done that through our chats, which had changed from casual gists to flirting and then even to discussing our sexual life, when I had complained to him about Eddie. He knew exactly what I wanted, and he kept making promises of giving exactly that if I wanted to give it a trial. There was no promise of love or anything else, just good sex. So I agreed, thinking of it as a one-time thing, especially because I didn't expect it to be that good between us. But when I finally understood why he told me his ex-girlfriend kept begging to come back for more, I couldn't stop going back to Dan. He made me feel good and sexy, and then he taught me different things I never knew existed about sex, things that my safe and practical boyfriend wouldn't do. Things I have never and could never try out with Eddie. I did them with Dan. It became like an addiction. I couldn't help it. I kept coming back for more. Dan was quite rich on his own, and he spent on anything he wanted at the moment, and it didn't matter to him just how much it was. I was glad for it for a while because he did give me lots of money, or how ridiculous that thing could end up becoming eventually. He was a reckless spender, but I didn't mind because he gave me money too, loads of it. Although I spent it all on outings with my friends. Staying with Dan made me realize just two things, and that was that money and sex went hand in hand. It was like a win-win situation for me. I was finally getting the sexual satisfaction I wanted, and on the side, more money to spend. Eddie never spent as recklessly as Dan did, and he saved up for everything, and he even had us a joint account where we saved money together, so we could have something to fall back to when things got rough, according to him. Although Eddie did most of the savings, I just chipped in one or two whenever I liked, especially after I started getting more money from Dan. I would leave almost every money that Eddie gave me in the joint account simply because I didn't need it. When I finally told my friends about Dan, instead of discouraging me and trying to get me to reconsider just how horribly things could turn out, they had instead giggled and clapped excitedly, begging me for more details while I told them stories of how much exploring Dan and I were doing. They got from the money Dan gave me indirectly, and it made them happy, and they happily supported my decision to cheat. And their readiness to accept what I was doing made it easy to continue with my affair even more, to become even more bold about it. I took them with me on some outings I went with Dan, and since Dan didn't mind my friends being around, we always ended up having fun, all three of us. I even stopped sleeping with Eddie completely because of it, and I didn't want to always be sexually frustrated anymore. I started picking fights with Eddie after that, and I just didn't appreciate him anymore. I felt I had someone better, so even if he left, there'd be another. I love Eddie, believe me, but at that time I felt that I could never lose, even though I ended up losing him. It was stupid, a very stupid decision, and I know that now, regrettably. One time I had an argument with Eddie, and instead of apologizing because I was at fault, I never did. I just left the house and went over to Dan's place, and afterwards, I went to my friend's place. When they heard that I fought with Eddie and the reason why, they had mocked Eddie and then went ahead to talk about his sex life, which was apparently nothing at all compared to Dan, just to appease me. And I felt pleased that they supported me, and I even laughed with them when they kept trying to illustrate the size of his male genitals with their hands, just to mock him even further. They kept discussing how small it probably would be, that it couldn't even keep a woman happy, and I thought everything I was doing was right, and so I continued. Sleeping with Dan for money and for the sexual satisfaction that he gave me. But I guess you could never really get away with everything, especially things like this, because eventually I got caught. And how I had gotten caught is what I'm still puzzled about. You see, despite the fact that my friends encouraged my affair, I was still careful not to let Eddie find out. Even though he did eventually find out and had revealed my secret in the most shocking and most humiliating way. The company Eddie worked for decided to host an award party for its staff, and although other people from everywhere was invited. It's a huge company and is one of the fastest growing companies around, so you can imagine just how massive the party was going to be with lots of influential and wealthy people. Eddie had been promoted prior that day, and he was also selected for an award because of his hard work in the company. Eddie was so happy and had invited me to be his date, and I didn't say no because of all the people I knew would be there. I shopped for my perfect dress and matching jewelries, and everything had to be perfect. My friends had managed to secure themselves dates to the party, so they also came along with me when I went shopping, and I paid for their dresses too. The night came and everything started out really fine. I thought it was fine. Now that I remember everything that had happened on that day and before that day, I realized that nothing had started out fine. Not that day, not the day before, and not even 3 days before that day. I know now that Eddie had probably found out about my affair then, and he was putting up an attitude with me. At least that's what I thought. I thought he was only behaving that way to make me fight with him and refuse to come with him to the best party of the year, so I ignored his attitude completely. He ignored me too, always coming back home later than usual, and didn't call to tell me where he was and when he was coming back. He wouldn't even eat the food I cooked for him and just totally and absolutely ignored me. I convinced myself that it was either work stress or he didn't want me coming along with him for the party, so I said nothing at all. Dan was out of town at that time, so I was stuck with staying at home and going out occasionally with my friends. They had jobs, so I couldn't hang out with them all the time, but I endured it, and I managed fine. When it was the day of the party, when I finished dressing up, expecting a compliment from Eddie when he saw me coming downstairs to meet him so we could go together, he said nothing, just looked at me and just removed his car keys from where he hung them and went to the garage. I was totally pissed because I had been expecting some sort of response from him, especially because he had been ignoring me for days. We drove in silence. Eddie was probably thinking about how to ruin me sitting there in his car fuming because I didn't get any compliments from him. We arrived at the party, and immediately Eddie abandoned me. He went in search of his boss, and they started talking. I was left to my devices, but luckily not for long because my friends arrived with their dates, and we all sat together. The party started, and my friends and I just spent time giggling as we gossiped about every person we saw there. It was either about their crooked dress or their uncomfortable heels or their overbaked faces, and we laughed about everybody else but ourselves. And then when it got to the highlight of the party, the award-giving ceremony, Eddie had been called up last. He was given 3 different awards, and everyone was whistling and clapping. It was obvious he was loved by everyone there, most of them his clients, and others his colleagues. But instead of clapping and whistling as they had, I was annoyed because I saw the way he smiled brightly on stage, making jokes during his speech and making everyone laugh. And there was the fact that in his appreciation, he didn't even mention me, not at all. I was really angry, and I just looked at my friends who clearly understood the assignment. One of them had snickered and then mentioned that he was perfect there on stage, but definitely not in the bedroom, and I immediately giggled. Relieved to have been reminded of something that was his undoing, my friends continued, and I joined in giggling and looking at him on stage with his smart pants that housed what I called a mini bulb. We laughed hard, and when Eddie was done with his speech and headed back to our table, I was still laughing. When he sat down, I kissed his cheek and wished him congratulations, and it was mockery because I was still laughing hard from what my friends and I had said about him. So when I looked at my friend again, and she had used her index finger and her thumb to describe a small size, I laughed again, mimicking her by doing the same. But what I didn't know was that Eddie understood everything, and he knew exactly what we were talking about because he had gotten up very angrily, surprising me with how he almost sent my glass of champagne flying off the table. And then he went back up on stage asking for a chance to say something. Everywhere went silent. People were wondering what he had to say again, and he just smiled and told everyone that in his vote of appreciation, he forgot to add one person, his fiancée. I sat there feeling on top of the moon for 1 second, and then the next second so shocked and ashamed. He said in his speech that when he forgot to add my name to the list of people he was grateful for, that it hadn't been a mistake. It was on purpose, and that he wasn't planning on saying anything before, just dealing with the situation personally and not in public. But he said after his award speech, and he had gotten back to the table, he noticed that my friends and I were insulting him openly by mocking the size of his penis. And that was when he decided that I should be exposed of all my bad deeds. He proceeded to tell everyone right there just how horribly I've behaved. Cheating on him with another guy and rubbing it in face, thinking I was very smart. He told everyone he had evidence of all my text with Dan, and even pictures that I had boldly taken myself because I wasn't ashamed of what I was doing. He ended his whole speech with, "Thank you for all the insults, and I never want to see you again. We're over you, slut." And he dropped the mic and just left. I couldn't move, too shocked to say anything, and even when my so-called friends all quickly left, too afraid of the public's reaction, I still couldn't leave the seat. My legs and hands were shaking so badly, and I couldn't believe that Eddie had known about Dan. I couldn't believe that he found out and had decided to expose me right in front of everyone there. Eventually, when everyone there kept staring at me and muttering what were probably disgusting things about my behavior, I mustered all the courage and got up to leave. But I still couldn't stand up. I kept trying to will my body to, but I just kept staring at my laps and crying. It was only when one of the security guards had come and told me to leave, because I was disrupting the party, that I was able to get up on shaky legs and leave. Perhaps it was the fact that I was thrown out of a party like that gave me enough strength to will myself out of that place. I was afraid to go home. I didn't know if Eddie would be home, and I didn't want to face him. Not yet. I was too scared, and so I went to my friend's place, but both of them refused to answer the door. I knew they were both in, but they refused to open up their doors. I called and texted them both, but they ignored everything. Eventually, I ended up sleeping in a motel, hoping that everything would be all right in the morning. But by morning, everything just grew worse. I woke up to different texts from different people, and my phone was blasting with many calls, both from strange numbers and also from my parents. I didn't understand what was happening until I went online. I was shocked when I saw the video of Eddie's speech online. Someone had taken the video at that party, and the person also showed my face so well, so people had no doubt who Eddie was speaking about. The person had even recorded the embarrassing moment when the security guard had asked me to leave. But that wasn't all. Eddie had also made a post with all the evidence he spoke about on it, and there I saw those pictures I had taken with Dan in that hotel room, the one time we went on a trip to Paris. I remember that I had been so excited being in that city, and I wanted to keep many memories, but we only got there at night and couldn't go sightseeing because Dan had been too tired to, and I knew nowhere. And we were leaving the next day, so I just took that picture of us both in bed after having sex as a memory. But now I realize just how terrible that decision had been, because it was now one of the things implicating me more and proving Eddie right. There were also screenshots of messages between us planning our next outing, him asking me about Eddie, whom he had always described as my cowardly fiancé. Everything was right there, nothing left to human eyes to deny the truth that I was a cheat. Someone had even gone ahead to do his research about Dan, and discovered exactly who the Dan that I was cheating with was. It was only through that curious person's post that I found out Dan was actually married and his wife was the real owner of everything he was gallivanting around. He was also sleeping with one of my so-called friends behind my back too, and this person even got pictures to back it up. I realized just how stupid I had been trusting those girls with my life and letting them encourage me to fall into a trap. I dug myself. I've been in hiding since then, and a lot of people have been coming for me. I'm so scared with the extent of the fan base that Eddie now has, that someone wouldn't actually harm me when they saw me. I haven't even spoken to my parents since that day, and when they kept calling with no response from me, they eventually stopped. I was too afraid of hearing the same disgust and criticism in their voice as everyone else, and it would break me even further. far more than I already am broken. I've also become so broke. I had never thought of saving any money before because Eddie did the saving for us, and I spent any money that Dan would give me on the things I thought were necessary to have as a lady. An overpouring wardrobe full of clothes that I never wore, different bags and shoes of different heel lengths and all the others, all of which I'm sure Eddie has burned or gotten rid of by now. Eddie had managed to block my access to our savings account together as part of his revenge too, so all the money I had with me was what I gathered to rent out a small space to stay in because I didn't have anywhere else to go to. I've been going out in ridiculous disguises ever since, trying to reach out to Eddie, to apologize, to get this sudden heavy weight of guilt and regrets off my shoulders. But Eddie is blocking out every attempt of mine, and he's refusing to see me or even reply to my texts. I've tried everything that I can just to get through to Eddie, but nothing is working, guys. I really regret everything I did, and I really want to make amends. I really desperately want to make amends. Please help me, guys. Update. Hello, Reddits. It's been a while since my last post. Well, it has actually been just 2 weeks, 2 days, and 14 hours, but who's counting? Who has nothing else to do but have enough time to keep records of things like that? Who has to do absolutely nothing except breathe to be ruined even further? I'm sure the answer is me. Life has been so hard on me, and it almost feels like I'm finding it so hard to breathe properly anymore. Every day feels like a new day to get even more ruined, and it's so sad how I've ended my life. I cannot even call life cruel because I deserve everything I got right. I'm sure you agree with that if your comments are anything to go by. Funny how I came here thinking it was my last chance, my last hope of finding out a way to reach out to Eddie and get him to forgive me. But when I made that post and came back the next day to check what people had to say, I cannot say I was shocked by the negative comments. I did expect them, but not from everyone. I thought someone out there would understand me and would realize just how awful I already feel about the whole thing and help me, even if it wasn't with the thing I desperately came here to seek for, but at least with a word of encouragement. But I got nothing. No encouragement. No advice on how to work things out with Eddie. Just pure hatred. Being dragged online on social media was already too much for me, but coming here with my whole life story and still getting the same response is a whole lot of baggage to deal with. I've been stuck in this room trying hard to make sense of everything else, but nothing makes sense. My life simply doesn't make sense anymore. Not those guys on social media having a field day with my life. Not with you guys right here insulting me. Not with my whole life falling apart, and especially not without Eddie. Nothing. Absolutely nothing makes sense without him in my life, and it's so painful I realize that only too late. I should never have cheated on him. I should have been faithful to Eddie. The sexual satisfaction I kept seeking for and finally got has now caused more harm than good. In fact, there was no good whatsoever with it. Dan, whom I cheated with, is now divorced with nothing attached to his name. I knew not because he contacted me since then, but because someone had decided to have a field day about it too. They took a picture of him walking into an apartment that looked even more cheap and disgusting than mine was. I'm only grateful that no one knows where I live, because that would have been on the internet by now too. The person I sacrificed my perfect relationship for is now a person with no name, maybe one, and it is mockery. My so-called friends, those wicked beings that I never should have been friends with in the first place, have stayed away from me. But luckily, karma doesn't leave out some people in delving out its revenge. They were also caught in the crossfire, their names boldly out there with every information, even the ones I never knew before. Like how one of them had actually slept with her stepfather and was kicked out by her mom ever since. She had only told me that her mom was far away, in a place with absolutely no network to communicate, but that her mother wrote to her once in a while. Our friendship had always been built on lies and was bound to fail right from the start, and I regret not knowing that sooner. I would have stayed as far away as possible from them. I would never have told them anything about what was going on between Eddie and I. Now that I think about it, there were better ways than cheating to have handled the whole situation. I could have easily talked to Eddie about it. We would have tried different ways of making each other happy instead of trying to force him to see what wasn't obvious. I should have done better. Now I've ruined my only chance at happiness for life, and there's no undoing it. I wish I had been more sensible from the beginning. I wish I knew the end from the beginning. Then perhaps I would have learnt about all of these happening and prevented it. I would have shown Eddie the extent of respect he had shown me throughout our relationship. I would have loved him the way he loved me. I would have been very faithful to him and avoided those two snakes I called friends and also Dan, the bigger snake. The truth is, I do not even blame them. They didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one solely at fault for thinking that they were nothing like that. I was the one blinded by whatever had blinded me into making terrible decisions. Now everything is burned to the ground. Now I have no one, not one person on my side. I'm all alone with no help of any sort. I've lost respect, love, and regard from everyone, including myself. These days, I cannot even bear to look at the mirror because of how ashamed I become day by day. And it's also now my parents' turn to ignore me too. I've been trying to reach them for like forever, but none of them would answer. They were obviously passing a silent message, one that was clear and loud. They were ashamed of me and wanted nothing to do with me too. Eddie is no different, in fact, even worse than my parents. He read my texts, all of it, and after giving me hope that he would respond this time, he was seeing the sincerity in my regrets. He saw the in-depth of my unhappiness for ruining things between us, but he never does respond, dashing my hopes each time. It's almost surreal, and I cannot believe that I no longer have access to Eddie the way I used to. Those moments that I took for granted, those precious memories I should have worked hard to preserve with all my heart. It's funny the crazy little things you can miss when you no longer have access to them. Like how he would hug me to himself after a long day at work. How he would kiss me on my mouth when we woke up, not minding my morning breath. And we would both wrestle on the bed, and he would let me win when he was obviously stronger. Those little dates we went on, and the way his eyes always twinkled when I wore a new dress that hugged my figure. The way he always respected me and all my decisions. The way he had told his parents about us, introducing me as his wife to them when we were barely 2 months into the relationship. He had never given me any reasons to doubt his love for me right from the start. It hurt so much that I used my stupid actions to destroy that love and turned it to hatred. My heart beat so painfully every time knowing that I did myself dirty, that I made Eddie lose that sparkle in his eyes when he stared at me, that I made Eddie hate me to the point of wanting to destroy me so much that he had exposed me in front of all those people. I regret the silly act I had put up with those friends of mine at the party. I regret laughing at Eddie when he had done right from the beginning of the relationship, was respect me. I regret telling my friends the awful things I told them about Eddie. I never should have. I should never have been so stupid. I cannot forget the look on his face as he recounted right there on that stage, staring right at me, all the horrible things I was doing and thinking of them as hidden. I cannot believe I tried to play him for a fool. Because I've not only ended up as a fool, but a big pathetic one with absolutely no one on her side. If this is what the rest of my life looks like, I don't think I look forward to it. I don't look forward to a life without Eddie in it. I don't look forward to a life full of some pain and regrets that seems to add up every day. I don't look forward to this life that promises nothing but pain and emptiness. I don't look forward to these millions of broken pieces that are now my life, because there's no way to put it back together, even if I spend years doing so. I'm shattered, and I'm so scared I'll remain so forever. Day by day, I miss Eddie even more, and it's so painful knowing that I could never be the woman by his side again. I could never earn that right again. I've lost it, and I don't get a second chance, not with everything I've done. Thinking of the fact that Eddie would probably move on, if he hasn't already done so. He would move on with some other woman. Someone that would treat him right and respect him and would never think to cheat on him or mock him with her friends. Someone that would love him the right way, the way he needed to be loved. Someone he would be proud to call his wife someday. Someone with values to add to their relationship. Someone that is totally different from me. Someone who is not me. That thought hurts more than anything else. It hurts more than the insults I've received so far. It hurts more than the loneliness that has haunted me from that day of the party. It hurts more than the thought of spending the rest of my life in solitary. I wish I had a chance to do things over, that maybe I could get the opportunity to go back in time and undo my wrongs. I wish that I could get forgiven for all the damage I've caused. But that will never happen, right? I will never get a second chance. I'm going to be forever stuck like this. This sad, lonely, and depressed woman with so much pains and regrets to last her lifetime. I hope you guys learned something regardless of how much you detest me. If nothing, learn to hold on to that special person in your life and not let them go like I have, and now stuck with so many regrets. Thanks and goodbye.